Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker, retired, and proud of it. Today for me, it's the 11th of January, 2013. Made it, and the world made it too, despite horrible predictions of Mayan apocalypse, which the Mayans never believed in. But the Mayan calendar has turned over into a new cycle, and our calendar turned over into a new year, and I'm happy to be here. So that's basically it. The other thing I have to say is anything I talk about, by the time you see it, it's going to be terribly obsolete because the same show is going to be aired for an entire month, and I haven't actually aired a show since a week before the fiscal cliff in December. And during that show, I predicted that we would fall off the fiscal cliff and that our deficit would drop drastically and everything would be better. However, fortunately, that didn't happen because supposedly it would have caused much higher unemployment and thrust us into a short recession and a long period of a lot of people having long-term unemployment that are presently employed. So I guess that's a good thing. The minus of it is the deficit is not going to go down as much as we thought. The deficit the previous year was $1.05 trillion. Down from 1.3 trillion, and receipts have been going up. Unemployment has dropped more than expected, and I was been trying to piece together the actual impact of the fiscal cliff negotiation. First of all, what got negotiated? We did technically jump the fiscal cliff because they didn't come together. I believe they finally passed the, wasn't the budget, but the fiscal cliff resolution on the last day of the previous Congress, which actually jumped into a little bit of 2013. And I think that the negotiating was, the final votes were on the 2nd and the 3rd of January. So technically we did jump the fiscal cliff, and all the Bush tax cuts were eliminated for 2 days and then restored. What was negotiated basically was originally Obama wanted to let the Bush tax cuts expire for the wealthy, defining wealthy as over $250,000 income a year, and to let capital gains tax for those making over $250,000 a year go from 15% to 20.3%. And the top tax to go from 35 to 39.6. That was negotiated up to $400,000 for a single person and $450,000 for a wealthy family. Everything above that goes up both for income tax rate to 39.6 and for the capital gains rate, which goes up to 20.6. So there is an increase, about $120 billion a year. It's going to change year by year by year, depending on how our economy is doing and how many people are over that limit. The gain is reduced by $40 billion. The other thing they got rid of was that 2% Social Security break, which reduced the employees' side of Social Security from 7% to 5%. That was put in 2010, was redone in 2011 after all kinds of drama between Republicans and Democrats. And basically, it enabled everybody to have an extra $50 a week. People who make $50,000 a year at $50 extra a week to spend on whatever they wanted to spend it on, and hopefully people at that level would spend all their money. The payroll tax actually tops up at $109,000. So somebody making $1,090,000 a year pays 1/10 of the payroll tax that somebody at the maximum pays. So as a percentage of their income. So the wealthy are paying 1%. The middle class are paying 14%, including Medicare, and the employers are putting in their 7% of the first 109,000. So that accounts for almost all of us, and almost all of us pay for Medicare and Social Security. Social Security expenditures in 2013, at least the predicted amount is $886 billion, and they collect about $1 trillion in these different taxes. And the income tax and the capital gains collections has gone down drastically, a total of over $400 billion a year. Compared to where they were during the Clinton administration. And that's half because international corporations or corporations with one post office box in the Cayman Islands basically stopped paying corporate tax. And I think that's a good argument right there to replace corporate tax with some kind of a value-added tax, which I've said before. So the bottom line is, so what? Well, the so what is basically the nation as a whole is going to pay $200 billion more a year in taxes. Some of that is needed to back up Social Security and Medicare, which is the payroll tax. And the wealthy are going to pay a little bit more. What is this offset by? It's offset by parts of the fiscal cliff on the other side, the spending side, that were resolved, in which case they decided that they would extend unemployment or long-term unemployment for another year. That's about $60 billion, 30 to 60. I see different figures all over the place. And there was a doc fix. Technically, there's a limit on payments to hospitals and doctors. That limit has been overridden every year for the last 10 years. And that costs somewhere between $11 and $30 billion. And again, every time I look at another document, it's a different amount. Then we have Sandy relief, which still hasn't been completely passed. They passed $10 billion out of $60 billion, and we'll see what the Republicans want to do now. So that's basically the fiscal cliff. So the fiscal cliff has been negotiated. The crisis has been averted. America can keep on growing. In December, 155,000 new jobs, just about the average of what's been produced throughout all 2012. So the economy is marching along. The unemployment rate is 7.8%. Now, the settlement that ended the fiscal cliff and basically resolved, at least presently, what's going on in 2013, which is on, I believe, a continuing resolution, that was projected, at least the president's budget was projected with the savings at the 250,000 or the taxes at the 250,000 level to have a budget deficit of $900 billion. I had, estimated in the last show that it would go down to $780 billion, but I was a little bit off. However, receipts are greater because the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, said, well, by the end of 2012, and this was their prediction at the beginning of 2012, we would have unemployment of 9.1%, which was probably at that point a pretty reasonable prediction. So the actual unemployment rate dropped to 7.8%, and that had a lot to do with getting Obama reelected. So basically, we're collecting more money just on the regular taxes that are there. How much will be collected and what will be the result of 2012? We don't know. However, 2012, you have to realize, ends in September because they're fiscal years, and that we're deep, deep, deep into 2013. So what do we have to look forward to? Well, the Republicans were very, very upset. The only way the fiscal cliff was finally done is the Congress, or the House of Representatives, were so chagrined that their leader was willing to raise taxes on the wealthy at all, that they stabbed him in the back and wouldn't even accept his Plan B, which then had to go back to the Senate and would have thrown the ball into the Obama Democratic Senate court. Consequently, as we were falling off the fiscal cliff, actually passed it. McConnell, who's the minority leader of the Senate, got together with Biden. They worked up the agreement that I just described and passed it through the Senate, sent it to the House. The last day that the House was in session, basically Boehner, the Speaker of the House, could have said, I'm not bringing it up to the floor. Everything that goes to the floor for a vote has to go through the Speaker of the House. And if the Speaker of the House doesn't want to bring it to the floor, it doesn't get voted on. But he went past around his own constituency, brought it to the floor, and it passed with 165 Democratic votes and 85 Republican votes. And all the Tea Party and conservative Republicans just voted against, voted to jump the fiscal cliff, to sabotage the economy, if that's what would have happened. I'm not sure it would. And save, the economy from another terrible sabotage. I'm putting it over there. All right. So Boehner then, a new Congress got set. The Republicans have fewer senators, and they still control the House of Representatives, but they got 10 fewer seats, even in the House of Representatives, which was very much and very thoroughly gerrymandered by Republicans in various states, like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and so on and so forth. So now we have still a Republican majority. However, if 18 Republicans jump, then and all the Democrats vote for something, the Democrats win. So they have less to shave for. So basically, the real power over there is still in the Speaker's corner, and the Speaker in the House can refuse to bring things to the floor. If he brings things to the floor for an up and down vote in the Congress, something that's already passed in the Senate, then the Democrats can vote for it as they did the fiscal cliff with a few Republicans, and it'll pass over the objections of the majority of the Republicans. So, he can play that game, the Speaker, but then he's going to piss off his own constituency. So that's the situation pretty much up to now, and that's how that got passed. So what's in the future? The future is a debt ceiling comes to a head again, as it did in 2011, that caused this whole mess in the first place. Probably at the end of February, beginning of March, and possibly into toward the end of March. It's hard to say because there's all kinds of games that the government can play, the Treasury Department can play, in order to not spend quite up to the limit. Can't go on forever, but it can usually go on for a few extra months. Technically, the debt ceiling should have been hit just about now. And there's a whole bunch of the Speaker Boehner, in order to get reelected as Speaker, has said, if we don't get those spending cuts that we want, we gave in on taxes, which they really didn't, If we don't basically get incredible amounts of spending cuts and what they call entitlement reform, we're going to destroy the world economy. We're going to basically not approve new borrowing. We're going to stop, close down the government. And that's the leverage that we have. We have this leverage, and we're going to use it. We're going to use it. If it destroys the country, we don't care. But of course they do care, because first of all, the billionaires that have supported them last time around, many of them are in Wall Street. Many of them will make money initially if the market collapses, and they know that the market's about to collapse. But the fact of the matter, if it really collapses, we're going to be back where we were in 2008, and they're probably going to collapse as the banks did in 2008 and 9, and need a new rescue when there isn't going to be a rescue. There's basically nothing to rescue them with. So I don't think Wall Street's going to be too thrilled about not approving an increase to the debt ceiling, destroying our full faith and credit. And however, that doesn't stop the Republicans from being irrational. You have to take into account that the Republicans listen to Fox News, they watch Fox News, they listen to Rush Limbaugh, they listen to talk radio. They're basically in a sounding board of their own making. So if all of this conservative media just keeps on saying, don't raise the debt ceiling, don't give up, who cares if the government gets shut down? The government doesn't do anything anyway, blah, 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 blah. And there's nothing Obama's going to do. He's evil, and therefore anything we do is just going to be good. Anything they do is going to be bad. So even Wall Street doesn't buy that. Bloomberg doesn't buy that, which is actually a station, a news station, a business news station, as well as the mayor of New York of the same name. CNN doesn't believe that, and CNBC doesn't believe that. However, in the sounding board, these people that are elected in solid Republican conservative districts have no one to listen to but their own media and their own sounding board. If they believe it, they're not going to vote to increase the debt ceiling. Boehner has put himself on the spot saying he's not going to bring that to a vote unless he gets these cuts. Now, what are the cuts that they want? Well, it hasn't changed since the Ryan plan. They want to turn Medicare into a voucher system that benefits the insurance companies, where you get a voucher to get insurance if you're old, and if you can't pay for the remainder, then you die under a bridge. They want to privatize Social Security so that the $1 trillion a year that's collected in Social Security payroll tax goes into the equivalent of 401ks for each person, or at least a portion of it does, and then Wall Street can invest it and take their cut. All right, that would remove the whole concept of the defined benefit. In other words, if you get old and you get to be 65, you've been paying into Social Security, present-day taxpayers are going to support you in your old age. Present-day taxpayers are going to support your medical care in your old age. So that's basically the system now. So they want to take that system, throw it away, privatize it, and the way to privatize it is to keep taxes so low so that deficits will be so high that there's no other way to solve the problem of incredible crushing debt than to take Social Security away from the average people and take Medicare away from the average people. All right, and they also want to cut Medicaid and cut down the safety net and so on and so forth. Well, That's fine for their 20% of voters. Even though they had 47% all told of the voters, most Republicans are actually pretty moderate. And Romney came up with all kinds of moderate talk and moved to the center and so on and so forth. However, there's that 25% of our electorate, many of which are from the South or from this, middle of the West states and Texas, who actually believe in that whole theory and believe it thoroughly. And all of their representatives, they're gerrymandered except for a few in the large cities and so on and so forth. And the poorer areas are basically Tea Party, Freedom Works Republicans. And they're not going to move. They're not going to move. They're not going to budge, so on and so forth. So what do we do about it? What if it comes to another crisis? Well, I absolutely believe that Boehner has shown his what his stuff is. He's willing to avert the fiscal cliff. He's probably willing to avert the government shutdown, even though he's promised his constituents that he isn't. But if he does, what are we going to do? If there's no fiscal debt ceiling raising, are we able to borrow? And there's a couple different theories about that. The first one is based on the 14th Amendment. Don't forget, Republicans have tried to get rid of the 14th Amendment a number of times. They did it again, and it didn't work, where they've been trying to get rid of birthright citizenship, which is also in the 14th Amendment. But in Section 4 of the 14th Amendment, it's very, very clear. The validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection and rebellion, shall not be questioned. That was passed 1867, right after the Civil War. Basically recognized all of the freemen, the former slaves who were born on the soil of the United States as being full citizens, and everybody else born on the soil of the United States was a full citizen too, which resolved one of the big questions of the Civil War. And the other question of the Civil War is, if we bring the South back into the nation, they're going to vote to deny pensions to the Northern soldiers, and they're going to vote basically not to honor the debts incurred from the Civil War. So that's why that Section 4 was written in there. However, it says debt for expenditures authorized by law shall not be questioned. And basically, what the debt limit does, it says you cannot borrow over the limit set by Congress, and even if the expenditures were authorized by Congress into the law. So even though the Republicans and the Democrats in the Senate have achieved and voted for budget and appropriations that go over that limit, that the government can't borrow the money to spend over the limit. That's what the debt limit says. However, it appears to be unconstitutional from the words of the 14th Amendment. So one of the alternatives is because Obama said, I'm not negotiating, something that's obviously bad for the United States, which is you should just raise the debt limit by definition, because these are debts authorized by law, is to say the 14th Amendment applies over here, and we don't have to obey the debt limit. Another method is to issue a $1 trillion coin, put it into the Federal Reserve bank account for the federal government, and then say, now we have an increase in the debt limit. Now, initially, Obama's press secretary has said, no, we're not going to do any of these things, but we're not that close now. My name is Reed Silver, and the name of this show is Fed Pride, because I'm a federal worker, proud of it.